Okay.
Tafaddal with the opening dua for us.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Subhanaka la ilma lana illa ma 'allamtana innaka antal alimul hakim. ربنا زدنا علما وارزقنا فهما اللهم إنا نسألك علما نافعا ورزقا واسعا وشفاء من كل داء ربنا تقبل منا بسر سورة الفاتحة بسم الله غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم.
Shukran Imam Hussein. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. Let me just take it. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammad wa ashabihi wa barik wa sallim. Welcome. My apologies for the last session that we could not have that session. But for those who are not able to join us, we will upload the recording. So we will proceed with where we left off now from where we left off. We dealt with the second decree. We said there were 5 decrees. We are going to deal today with the lifetime decree, inshallah. The lifetime decree is the decree that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the angel to write down the decree of a person when the person is 120 days in the womb of the mother. So if we haven't actually entered the world yet, so to speak, and our life has just started because the ruh is blown into the person in the mother's womb, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructs the angel to write down the decree. Now, from what we are told, it deals with the lifespan, it deals with the actions of that person, it deals with the sustenance of that person, and whether that person will have good fortune or bad fortune. Now, even when we look at this, we must relate it to the things that we've previously spoken about. And that is, does it mean that our lifespan has been predetermined, our actions, our sustenance, and whether we're going to have good fortune or ill fortune, have those things all been predetermined? If I must ask that question, then the answer will be both yes and no. So many things that we find out when we discuss these things, the answer can be both yes and no, or maybe not. So we're going to go and look at what we've done previously. Previously, we said, we used the example, a person has a lifespan that's been decreed. The Malaa'ikah wrote down that lifespan for that person as 40. Allah has decreed it to be 40. Now, what does it mean? Does it mean that because the angels have, Allah has decreed it and the angels have written it down in your book of destiny, that you are going to go at 40? We also know that certain actions can change your lifespan. I'm quickly going to go through this. So as the example that we've used previously, you make dua for 90 years, Allah must grant you a lifespan of 90 years. We don't know how your dua is going to be accepted or not accepted by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if it is not fixed, and this is a very important point that we must remember, if your lifespan has not been fixed at 40 and Allah allows for it to be changed by your actions, then the legislative will, we remember there were two components to the will. The legislative will, that is connected to what Allah would like us to do. But our actions can actually change that. If it is, then the dua that has been made for 90 years, the dua that we've made here for 90 years can now impact on the lifespan of 40. So it's not fixed. The legislative will applies. If the legislative will applies, then the dua is accepted. That's a possibility. And if it is accepted, then Allah willing, you die at 90 because your dua has been for 90, it's accepted. But does it mean that every dua that you make, that it will be accepted? Not necessarily. We don't know what Allah's will is. There's another possibility, and that is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His wisdom decided to fix your lifespan at 40. Now the universal will applies. The universal will should be considered as something that is unchangeable. It doesn't matter what you do. Nothing impacts on what Allah has decreed when the universal will applies. And when that applies, then it means that you die at 40. Because it's been decreed for 40, it cannot be changed, and you now die at 40. But you've made dua. How does that impact on it? That impacts on it by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we said, can remove calamities from your life that would have befallen you, or otherwise the reward waits for you in the year after. Now this is taking maybe the earlier part of what we did and just putting it in another flowchart, which I think makes it a bit more clear. Now, does it come across clearly, or does it not come across clearly? Is there anything that is uncertain about this flowchart, what I have put up here now, before I move on? Let's open it up and let's just hear quickly.
I think it's very clear.
Alhamdulillah. So it's clear. You can take this diagram and test yourself and see whether you will be able to go through it and explain it. As it stands there, it appears to be very clear now. Unless there's any other questions, I'm going to move on. Now, if we look at this and we go back, I'm going to come back to this now. That deals in a sense with the issue of lifespan. The second area, I couldn't really understand the second area when I went through this hadith the first time, and in fact even the second time and the third time. I found it extremely difficult to understand. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decree our actions? How should we understand that? Does it mean that whatever we're going to do is going to be determined by Allah? then what is the point of giving us choice if our actions are going to be determined? And the way I understood it, which is why I put it in brackets, is it should be understood as those things that we would like to do. And if we go back to some of our previous issues that we discussed, we said, you can decide to do whatever you want, but the only one who can create effect is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So your actions, whether it is you want to go to your car and start your car, or whether you want to just lift your hand, those things can only happen if Allah allows for you to do it, gives you the permission. Or the Arabic word is the idhan. The idhan, it's waiting on the idhan, the permission or the authority for you to do that particular thing. Now, in the same way, one can talk about the question of sustenance. If we say, and it's clearly defined in many of the hadith, that our rizq, our sustenance for our entire lifetime has been decreed. We don't know what it is. That's the important factor. It's been decreed, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows. And the time when the Malaa'ikah has been instructed to write it down, that's recorded as your rizq. It's in your book that applies to you alone. Now, how should we understand the question of sustenance, that you will not get a cent more or a cent less? You won't get it a minute before or a minute after than what has been decreed for you for that particular time throughout your entire life. Then there is the fourth thing, where the decree is written to determine whether you will have ill fortune or good fortune. How must we understand this question of ill fortune or good fortune? Some people have interpreted this decree as saying Jannah or Jahannam. I would, for our purposes, would like us to understand it more in terms of whether you have good fortune or bad fortune in your life. Will you be lucky or will you be unlucky? Will you be one of those people that no matter what you do, you always seem to bump your head while other people walk through the same thing, nothing happens to them? How should we understand these issues? Now, the lifespan issue we've touched. And I would like us to now participate, and we go to the question of actions. How should we understand that the Malaa'ikah, while you're in your mother's womb still, you haven't even breathed your first breath. You weren't born yet, but it's been decreed what your actions are going to be. How should we understand that? Let me open up the floor and just hear what the understanding is of that.
But Salie, in terms of the fact that it's been decreed, obviously Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what we will ask in our lives. Allah knows the reaches of our repentance, our request from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and our disobedience. So all of those have been taken into account, I think, at the time when that decree was passed, in order for a person to, in order for that, should I say, decree to be significant.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that?
Maybe with the Salie, this could also be a substantiation of the ayat that Allah has created you and your actions. Allah has created you and your actions. The ayat.
Yes.
So there we can see it already as that decree.
Yeah, but Imam Hussein, if I could ask, yes, you're 100% right. It confirms that ayah. So if we take that ayah on its own, then it means you don't do. Allah is the one who does. You don't do, Allah does.
Yeah, but subject to the choice, of course.
Now where does choice fit in if Allah has decreed your actions? Allah has decreed your actions, but Allah is the only one who can create effect, who can make things happen. How should we now understand that there's been a decree to determine what our actions should be or will be? Anyone else?
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
Salie and Imam Hussain and everybody.
Alaikum
The
salam.
Salie does not refer to the Lawh al-Mahfuz, where the decree has been made already. So the changes that has happened already has happened,
Yes.
and because it has been recorded in Lawh al-Mahfuz, it has been determined like that.
The things that's in the Lawh al-Mahfuz will be the final outcome. It cannot be changed. It's unchangeable. Lawh al-Mahfuz, remember, when we talk about the preserved tablet, it can never ever be changed under any circumstances, no matter what we do. That is unchangeable, is cast in stone, it's written in stone. So if we talk about the lifetime decree, which is the third decree, when you're in your mother's womb, you're not born yet, now Allah issues that decree. If we say it is, for example, we take your point, if we say that it is the same as what is contained in the Lawh al-Mahfuz, then it means you're not born yet, but all your actions have been decreed. Does it make sense? Can it be the same? Anyone else want to maybe add or ask a question? All right, let me try and explain it. It's not an easy concept to understand. When Allah speaks about our actions, there's two components to our actions. The one is linked to choice, right? You don't do things without knowing what you want to do. You choose to do X or Y. You might not consciously be aware of what you want to do, but all our actions are generally governed by the choices we make. That's the one part. The second part of it is that the ability to execute the action comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now that we accept, we understand that now. Allah is the only one who can create effect. But the fact that we have choice determines the actions. But does every action or every choice that we make, does it translate or change into what we wanted to do? Does everything we want to do or we choose to do, does it happen that way? No. Because it is waiting on the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have decided that we want to do something. Now it gets to the point where the will of Allah will determine whether it is allowed to go through or whether it is going to be stopped or whether it's going to be changed. Do you want to add anything, Shabnam?
No, I always think of that example that Peter Manie told us about, like when you're coming out of your driveway.
Yes.
It's like you're about to come out your driveway, but for some reason, you just slam your brakes. And then before you know it, there's a car that comes up from behind you.
Yes. Which means that you might choose to do something, but we don't know what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's will is. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the decree that the Malaa'ikah made when you were still in your mother's womb about your actions, it would be Allah's foreknowledge, your point that you made earlier, Yunus, Allah's foreknowledge about what you are going to do. And because Allah knows what your choices are going to be and what you would like to do, Allah determines already Allah's response, whether Allah will allow that actions or not allow those actions. Is that clear, or must I restate the point? It's not a question of Allah deciding what your choices are going to be. It is where Allah's will is above our will, and our actions are waiting on the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to either allow it or not to allow it. Can I hear? Are we clear on this point before I even think of moving on? Muhammad Fasih?
I just want to maybe then just trace it to the way I understand it. So Salie is saying that at this level, that the understanding of all the actions being recorded is that it is not the choices that man is, it's not the choices that are being recorded, but it is the, well, it's not, you know, I'm a little bit unsure of this aspect. If Salie could maybe just but Salie can maybe just clarify it, because I'm struggling a little bit to kind of get that.
All right. Let me say this. This decision is or this decree is made before you're even born. So now there's a difficulty. You're not even born yet, but we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us with free will and choice. If we have free will and choice, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not override our choices and then keep us accountable. So we can exercise our choice, but we must take the consequences of whatever we have decided. Now, Allah has asked the Malaa'ikah to record those things relating to our actions. What is recorded there, in my understanding, would be those things that Allah will allow us to do or not to do. What is recorded is related to the actions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will allow us to do or not to do. Shabnam wanted to pull out of a driveway and she couldn't for some reason or other. The will of Allah was that she should stop there. No matter what. If Allah's will is that something must happen, nothing can prevent it. That is Allah's will. So Allah's will is above everything else. Now, the way we should understand this is that our actions is not only related to the choices that we make, but our actions is preceded by the choice which will result in something happening. There's a consequence of our choice. Our actions has a certain result. Whether that result will happen or not is dependent on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is that a bit more clear to you, Muhammad Fasih?
Yeah, I think it is a little bit more clearer. So it becomes about the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in relation to what will happen, as in a sense, rather than in relation to our choice, so to speak. Khair.
Yeah. Or to use your words now, this decree has to do with not our actions, but the way Allah has predetermined, because Allah has foreknowledge, predetermined whether Allah will allow or not allow those actions to happen or not happen. Can I hear from the other people whether it's clear or not clear? If you have difficulty with it afterwards, please don't hesitate to raise it again. But I will go on. Yes, yes, Imam.
Salie, I think this is a point you can do a chart, a flow chart on.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got one.
Okay. Oh, you got one.
Yeah. Okay.
Alhamdulillah.
Let me go on to the next one. The next one I think is sustenance, rizq. We in the previous flow chart that we did lifespan. One could just put the topic and change it not from lifespan but to rizq. What is your rizq? How does rizq? And in the same way, if Allah has predetermined what your rizq is going to be, and it's fixed, then nothing can change it. If it falls under the legislative will, it means that it can change. Let me rather just put up that because it seems as if that makes it a bit easier. If we okay, you've got that up there. So we say it's rizq here, right? Not lifespan. You make dua for more rizq, but Allah has determined what your rizq is going to be. Is that fixed or is it not fixed? If it's not fixed, then it means your dua can impact to change your actual rizq. It's Allah says, and the Quran and the Sunnah speaks clearly about it, that under certain instances, if it's not fixed, Allah allows you even things like family ties, being charitable, doing good deeds, not just asking for more rizq. Allah can increase it for you based on those actions, those things we've gone through. Now, in a case like that, your dua is accepted, your rizq is increased, and then you get more rizq. The other one is where your rizq is fixed. Now, it's not the legislative will, it's the universal will. It's unchangeable. In that case, your rizq remains as it is, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will reward you in a different form. So this one, I am not going to, unless you want to ask specific questions about it, I am not going to go beyond that. All I want to do before I go on to the next area is, so the sustenance area for now, let's say we've covered it at a very superficial level.
Salie, before we go on, let me just ask something quickly.
On that,
the universal will and the Lawh Mahfuz, is that one and the same?
no, it's not. It is and it isn't. The Lawh Mahfuz is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created as it's a created thing. The preserved tablet is a creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You remember the hadith that speaks Allah created the pen and Allah created the tablet? Those are created things.
Yes.
The will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala belongs to Allah. The divine will. And how it expresses itself in creation, it can be in two forms. Either the universal will, but what the universal will refers to is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not only the preserved tablet records the decisions of what is going to happen in the world, but the universal will is the ability of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to create all the laws that's unchangeable. So the one is the laws, the other one is the book that captures the history of it even before we come into existence.
Okay, Salie, my next question was going to be the decree of the Malak at the time when he brings the soul, when he blows the soul into the womb of the mother.
Yes.
Now that decree and the legislative decree, are those equal?
It is and it isn't.
Legislative decree and the
Some of it,
decree of the malak.
what we must understand, the malak is, I'm going to go to another slide. No, I'm not going to go to that. Let me just explain it and then I'll come to that. The decree of the malak is neither legislative nor universal. The decree that the malak, in fact, brings to us covers what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to apply to that person's specific life, which contains both the legislative will and the universal will. There are things in there, in your destiny, that's written there, that's both legislative and universal. No one knows. The Malaa'ikah brings it from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Malaa'ikah has no say or whatever. At a certain point, Allah has instructed the Malaa'ikah, now you bring down the decree that applies to that person. Some of it is changeable, some of it's unchangeable. The unchangeable ones are the universal ones that goes right through as decreed, and the changeable ones are the universal ones which can be changed by our actions.
Shukran, Mr. Salie.
Alhamdulillah.
It's just the terms. It's
Yes.
just the term which we
I'm-
must.
I'm very happy that you're asking, because the more we ask about those things, the more it imprints a clear understanding, inshallah, in our minds. Now, when the fourth one, of course, is the fourth thing that's decreed, that's referred to, is something that is not easy to understand. Whether that person will have ill fortune or good fortune. This is part of what Allah decrees for you. Now, if we just look at that, and we look at the question of fortune, let's talk about wealth now. Some people will be rich, some people will be poor. Allah predetermines that. Yet we must all do our best to be very good Muslims. Now, if we look at that, to make it easier to understand, I want to just quickly go to the next slide and just show you that these things can't be looked at in isolation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks to us in the Quran. This is how Allah speaks to us, and what is contained is guidance of how we should exercise our choice while we're on this dunya. And Allah warns us, warns, informs, communicates to us that whilst we're on this dunya, we're going to be tested. Life is about test. It's confirmed. Allah says so directly. The creator of this entire universe, the only one who knows everything about everything, informs us that the way Allah designed our lives, it will be made up of tests. And the second part, and then Allah speaks about the kinds of fear, hunger, losing goods, our lives, fruits of our toil, in other words, our income, and so on. And there are other things also. And Allah says further in the Quran, it's not good enough for us just to say we believe. And then we believe in Allah, and now you're not going to be tested. Allah makes it clear, you're going to be tested regardless. of whether you believe or not believe. How you will be tested is determined by what Allah has decreed as part of that period when you're in your mother's womb, of what the conditions are that will make up your life. Because every person's life will be made up differently. Now, it's important to remind ourselves when we look at these things that the moment something sounds as if it's unfair, you don't want to say it out loud, you think it. And sometimes if you in an environment where people won't judge you, you say, yeah, but doesn't that sound unfair? Remember, Allah, it's impossible for Allah to be unfair. Allah cannot be unfair. It is against the sifat and the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah confirms that in the Quran. Allah is not unfair. He is not unjust. And He will not do injustice to any person. In fact, Allah does the opposite. Allah gives you more than what you qualify for. Allah doubles your reward. Sometimes you just want to do something. There's an intention to want to do something good. And Allah rewards you. If you don't carry it out, you still get the reward. And the opposite, of course, is when you intend doing something wrong, it's not recorded as a wrong until you execute the wrong. And even when you execute the wrong, Allah asks the Malaa'ikah just to lift the pens for a while to allow you to make tawbah. If you make tawbah in time, then it's not even recorded. Subhanallah. That's how merciful Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. So if we look at this, and we now go back to what we said earlier, ill fortune and good fortune means that our lives are going to be made up of different things that can be considered as good fortune or ill fortune or bad fortune. Some people will be extremely healthy throughout their lives. I have a 95-year-old aunt. Alhamdulillah. A 95-year-old aunt who throughout her life, for the first time, went to hospital for a basic ailment a few years ago. Never been to hospital, extremely healthy. But she had a husband that got a stroke at the age of 40-something. And he stayed ill. Yeah, he never recovered completely from the stroke, and he stayed ill for another almost 20 years before he passed away. Now, if you look at that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed. Let's look at the health aspect now and say Allah has decreed poor health to the one and good health to the other. How you exercise your choice, the one who's got poor health will be determined differently from the person who has good health. And Allah will weigh all of these things up differently. So your conditions and your circumstances within which you will be tested while you are on this dunya, Allah has determined every single factor. Who your parents are, when they are going to pass on, how old will you be when that happens, how long will Allah give you the ability to complete your education, which area are you going to live in, what job are you going to have. All of those things form part of how Allah determines what is referred to as your circumstances or your fortune, good or bad. What Allah has determined, this is the key point in all of this. What Allah has specifically determined insofar as good fortune or bad fortune is not known by any one of us. It's not known. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. The Malaa'ikah doesn't know that either. The Malaa'ikah are mere conductors of the message, which takes us back to this. And that is that this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has, the decree of goodwill, good fortune or ill fortune, yeah. And whether that is fixed or not fixed will impact in the same way as it's impacted on how we spoke about lifespan. If it is part of the legislative will, say for example, you've passed what is standard 8, grade 10. You pass grade 10, but you would like to complete your matric. But circumstances in your life force you to leave school, or you don't feel like going to school, but afterwards you would like to complete your matric and maybe even go to college or university or whatever. If it is fixed that you're only going to have grade 10 here at the end, that's fixed. It doesn't matter what you do here. You can try how hard, you can apply, you can do whatever you want. But Allah's not unfair. So what Allah does, yes, it's fixed, it's part of that, but Allah will give you a benefit in the year after, or solve some other big problems in your life for you while you're on the dunya. You don't even have to wait till the akhirah. Allah will remove calamities that you may or may not know about. So if we look at it in that kind of sense, then yes, the the decree that's made at the beginning of a person's life, or when it just starts out, when the ruh enters the body, Allah does not predetermine our choices. Allah is most fair, and Allah will give us an opportunity to live our lives one way or the other, and allow us to change certain things and others not. But all of those factors, good or bad, difficult or not difficult, ease or hardship, will be taken into account when things are put on the scale. So in broad sweeps, the lifetime decree should be understood as this. So whether we talk about the lifespan, somebody must ask you about, now Allah determined the lifespan of the person. Will you be able to give an explanation? Will you be able to explain actions? Will you be able to explain sustenance, ill fortune, or good fortune? The only point that I want to make, some of the scholars have said Allah will decree who goes to Jannah or who goes to Jahannam. Yeah. That decree must then be understood as more Allah's knowledge of what is going to happen in your life, rather than determining beforehand, before you even born, that you are going to Jannah or Jahannam, because Allah is not unjust. Now I'm going to throw it open before we move on to the next area and ask on any one of the areas above, would you be able to explain now, ask yourself, would you be able to explain all 4 categories of the decree? If you are called upon to do it, and if you don't, then please feel free to raise a question, or even make a comment. The floor is open. does that mean we covered, everything is okay, we understand everything as far as this is concerned? You see, if this is understood, the other two decrees, the annual decree and the lifetime decree, should be as straightforward to understand. And then, if there are no questions, I'm going to immediately move on to that. Now, before I move on to it, did you ask yourself, because I asked myself, why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made a decree to determine basically the conditions under which I'm going to be living on this earth, and then come up with another one every year? And then on top of that, every day. How should we understand the question of a lifetime decree? Then there's an annual decree, and then there's a daily decree. How should we understand that? Yet Allah knows everything that's going to happen. And if Allah says something must happen, is it then not going to happen exactly like that? Why does it have to go through an annual decree, which the Malaa'ikah brings to us, or a daily decree? Why? Did you ask that question? Or even if you didn't ask your question, how would you react and respond to that? We're moving off now the lifetime decree. We're going to go on to the others, but linking in the question of lifetime to annual to daily decree. How should we understand that? Okay. Yes.
Salie?
Yes.
I was thinking that obviously this aspect of day, week, and yearly decree doesn't exist at the level where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Allah is not subject to time. So everything is one. The command of kun and everything that stretches from that is one. However, how it unfolds in our world, and to certain degree determined, when I say determined, by our actions, but ultimately with Allah's knowledge of our actions. So I think at those levels, that's where it unfolds, as opposed to having a situation where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have the Lawh al-Mahfuz, preserved tablet. Here, I think it's more of a matter of those different aspects unfolding, where we have not influence, because that would be a terrible thing to say, we don't have influence, but where Allah allows us to have influence rather.
Okay. Anyone else want to add to that? Yunus?
He's not with us, the gentleman.
Okay. All right, Shabnam. Shabnam, come. Why is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comes with a lifetime decree, an annual decree, and a daily decree? How would you understand that? Is it clear for you, or are we just accepting it? Okay, I'm not going to push. The way one should actually, you're very close to explaining it the way I would Muhammad Fasih. Let me just go to my flowchart. Flowcharts is a tool from Jannah. Okay, that one. This one you must really understand, so that You are able to do it in your sleep anytime. People must wake you up and put the chart in front, and you must be able to explain it without thinking. Because if you got this right, and you understand the concept between fixed and not fixed, then a lot of things are going to become a lot more clear. Of course, no, I'm not going to go to that. We can go to that. We're going to go to this one. Allah has made the decree, right? Now, the decree doesn't come directly to us. Where does it go? Allah gives it to the Malaa'ikah to bring it to us. So it goes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to the angelic world, to the unseen world, a world that has its own laws. It's received by the Malaa'ikah, and the Malaa'ikah's job is to bring it to the material world. So it comes from Allah first to the unseen world, and it remains there. The Malaa'ikah's job now is, it's waiting on an instruction from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's a mere postman supposed to deliver a message. It's got nothing to do with what's inside the letter. That's what you must clearly remember. The Malaa'ikah is a mere carrier of the message. It's a courier. It's a courier service. It takes the parcel from point A to point B. It's got nothing to do with what's inside the parcel. So the Malaa'ikah, the first one, brings the lifetime decree, and Allah has instructed the Malaa'ikah to record the lifetime decree at that time when you're in the mother's womb. What is very important to remember is that this is the only place, this orange block here, or whatever color you see on your screen, this whole entire block is the material world. It's the only place where time and space applies. Allah created a law specifically applicable to this universe of ours. And remember, Allah speaks in the plural form about the worlds, many worlds. The material world that we are living in has very specific laws, very specific laws. Time and space are both connected. In fact, scientists say it's part of the same continuum. Time and space are integrally connected. The one cannot exist without the other. Time and space. And what is also crucial about this material world of ours, we have these four universal forces that we spoke about earlier. Let me remind you, gravity, you all know, and then the electromagnetic force, and then the two nuclear forces. There are no other forces. This whole world is made up of, or this whole universe of ours. I'm not talking about the world, planet Earth, and the solar system. We're talking about the universe that encompasses all the galaxies and the stars and the planets and other solar systems, everything. This is the one world that we are referring to. Those four forces that I spoke about apply to the material world of ours. And Allah speaks about many other worlds. Now this one, the white block here, does time and space apply? Not the way we understand it. We can't explain it. But it's a created world, the angelic world. It's a world where the laws are completely different from the material world. The laws that apply to to this block is not known by us, and time and space as we know it doesn't apply there. It might apply differently, or either in the same way, in whatever way. It might apply in one or other way, but we're guessing. We've got no knowledge about that. And then there are other worlds as well. Every level or dimension of existence has its own laws that govern it. Here we're talking about the material world now. Now the material world has very specific laws. Time and space applies. So the time that a person will be born, the moment that ruh is blown into the fetus, that is the time when the life starts in that human being, and Allah has decreed that specific time. Does time apply to Allah? No. But time applies to our level of existence. Allah doesn't, and this is the way Allah designed it. Allah could have done it differently, but Allah designed this world that you start off from a fertilized sperm. And once the sperm is fertilized, it grows into a clot of blood, and then it develops till it's born, and then your life starts, and at 120 days, the ruh is blown into that entity. It's the same as a tree. You know, the germ, the seed germinates at a certain point, and it slowly grows till the end of its life, and then it dies. Allah has decreed that this is the way it's going to work in the material world. So that decree covers the entire life of that person. But let's say, I don't want to use lifespan all the time. Let's say you're going to, it's decreed, you're going to become a lawyer. That's written as part of the lifetime decree. You don't know it, hey? Remember this. This is not knowledge that's known. The Malaa'ikah writes in your book of destiny, writes, Allah has destined for you to become a lawyer. Must you become a lawyer? Will you become a lawyer? Maybe, maybe not. Is it part of the legislative will, or is it part of the universal will? If it's fixed, you will become a lawyer. If it is part of the legislative will, it can change through your actions, and you may become a tailor or a carpenter or whatever else. So the lifetime decree is made, and it comes at a certain time. But are you immediately a lawyer? Yeah. You've only just been born. Are you already a lawyer? You might not be a lawyer yet. Your whole life is going to be made up of years. Every year. And then every year is made up of days. So Allah just breaks it up into years. So that every year you are given the opportunity, if it is part of the legislative law, you are given the opportunity to impact on whatever Allah has destined for you. And the same way, so this should be understood as, it wasn't an easy concept for me, I must be honest with you, to explain this, but that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows us the opportunity every year, not just every year, every day, allows us the opportunity to impact on our destiny. Whatever Allah has decreed for us, whatever it might be. Allah allows us every single day and every single year. Allah created the opportunity for us to impact on those decrees. As long as we understand that this is the material world and time and space applies here, it doesn't apply in the same way, and the laws doesn't apply in the same way to this white block. And when we talk about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it doesn't apply at all. Time and space never applies to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yes, I hope that this has assisted to some extent to help us understand the concept of the annual decree and the daily decree without going into the actual detail. Can I just find out whether the concept is clear, or whether we should still go through the annual decree and the daily decree? Can I hear? All right, let me say that perhaps it would not be fair to just skip over it without at least giving an idea of the kinds of things that's going to be covered when we talk about the annual decree. Annual decree, or the night of Laylatul Qadr. Some people say it's the 15th of Sha'ban, but I'm not going to go into that whole debate. But Laylatul Qadr is the night that is generally accepted as the night where the annual decree comes down. It comes down from the level of the Malaa'ikah and descends to the lower level of the dunya. And now it becomes applicable, whether it is the legislative world or whether it is the universal world. And things like birth, death, rizq, actions of people, and all of those things, including blessings and calamities, all of those things are made known for that particular year. And even things that's outside our control, which I would assume to be part of the universal world, would be natural disasters like earthquakes and wars and political upheaval and so on. Those things are decreed on an annual basis. And on the other front, the daily decree are the specific conditions and things that will prevail on that particular day. Pretty much everything that happens on a day, whether it's under our control or not under our control, the decree is made for that, and some of it can be impacted on by our actions and some not. So I'm going to stop there with a formal presentation and just find out whether there are any questions that anyone would like to pose, or any comment they wish to make. Imam Hussein?
So can we say, Salie, that the daily decree, the way we impact on it is our striving, our hard work, du'as, ibadah. These are all our actions that can change the daily decree.
It may. It's possible that it can, if Allah wills. If it's not part of the fixed issues that's unchangeable, That's part of the universal will. If it's part of the universal will, we can't change it. But we must believe that everything we do can impact on our destiny. That's the way we should believe. Because we don't know what the will of Allah is. It might very well be that that is the very thing that we can impact on. So we should strive at all times to do, as you say, all our efforts, our striving, our ibadah, our good work, our relationships with people, making special effort to be kind and compassionate. Do as much as you can, because we don't know which of those actions can actually change our destiny for the better. So that would generally be the attitude we should have right from the beginning of our life. But in particular, at the daily level, yes.
But Salie, also then, can we then say that it's not a specific class of things that is, should I say, reserved as unchangeable, but rather it is certain things that we do not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has classed as fixed, and certain things that we do not know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has classed as changeable based on our deeds, as opposed to saying, yeah, no, you can't change your lifespan because that is predetermined, like most people say.
Yeah. In fact, they say your rizq you can't change. There's people who believe blindly like that. You can't change your rizq, they say. You can, if Allah has willed for you. But for another person, that might not be possible. So every single person, almost anything goes. If one can use that expression. Anything is possible to change. If Allah wills for it to change, but that doesn't mean that the same possibility exists for every single person. So every single person's life is made up, will be tested differently, will be changed differently. But at the end of it all, we must put in maximum effort, sincere effort, and try and do what we can to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stick as close to the guidance He has given to us in the form of the Quran and the Sunnah. Then we can't go wrong, really, if you just stick on the straight path.
So that also applies then to, for instance, when we're told, make dua for everything. If you get up in the morning, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the strength to get out of bed. Ask Allah for the ability to be able to make the cup of tea. So enlisting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is helping absolutely everything, because ultimately everything is waiting on the decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so through our making dua, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes that action the blessed one, or makes it happen basically. And at the same time also then the reward comes with that for us turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every aspect of our lives.
Yeah, and the other, very good point, excellent point. Maybe just to add a small point to that, and that is never underestimate the importance of anyone's dua. Even a sinner, even a homeless person, Muslim or not Muslim, I don't know. Allah is the one who determines this. Don't judge people, but ask people to make dua for you. And you make dua for everyone who asks of you to make dua for them. Because if we just use an example, there are two people who standing in front of a sick person and making dua. Both are making the same dua, exactly the same dua, using the same words. The one might be a very rich, affluent, and powerful person, and the other one might be a poor person, homeless, unemployed, making dua. Allah may have made it possible for that person who is poor. In his particular case, Allah will accept his dua if he makes it because of his particular conditions and circumstances. We don't know. It doesn't mean that every rich person's dua is not going to be accepted. Please let us not make that mistake. Allah will test people differently. But the point in adding to what you said, Muhammad Fasih, is that make dua as often as you can, and don't underestimate the importance of every single dua, because we don't know, like we don't know what Allah has decreed, we also don't know whose dua Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to accept. Okay. All right, any other final comments or questions?
So can we say, Brother Salie, if a dua is answered, it's actually a decree that has been changed, or a decree that falls
Coincide.
in coincides with Allah's will.
Yeah.
A accepted dua either falls coincides with Allah's will, or it changes a decree. Well, both is Allah's will.
Yeah.
Whether it changes or not,
Yeah.
both is Allah's will.
Your first point, you're 100% correct. The first point is where it coincides with the destiny Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has determined. It coincides. So there's no difficulty, it just moves through. The other one is where Allah subhanahu made it possible based on your actions. So your actions wrestles with destiny, and then it's possible that it can go through. It doesn't mean everything that can be changed by dua will be changed by every dua. We mustn't also fall in that trap that we just get up and we just make dua for every single thing so that you cover all the bases. If you make dua for everything, you're probably going to get everything. It doesn't work like that. There's a criteria, of course, whether the dua is sincere, and Allah will determine which dua to accept or not accept, but it doesn't mean a dua must give you the outcome if it is part of the changeable. There's no guarantee there. Guarantees are what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can or Allah cannot. But by and large, what you are saying is 100% correct. If it coincides with destiny, it goes through. Or if it falls in the legislative category of issues, then your actions can change the decree. Okay. Any final words from you, Shabnam?
No, just
Okay. All right, then I think we've reached that point. If there's no other further comments or questions, then we've reached that point where we're going to conclude. And inshallah, we're going to ask Imam Hussein to make the closing dua for us.
Just before the closing dua, Brother Salie, our chat, is everybody on the chat?
I don't think
If everybody's on the chat, I've downloaded 2 books. There's 2 books there. It's the names of Allah by Imam Ghazali, and a book on Aqidah, which was written by one of Sheikh Hazim's Sheikh Muhammad Salih Farfour. The book is very extensive, and I think we must go through the book and you see, at least through the index, and see if we can find topics related to what we're doing here with our classes with you, Brother Salie.
Inshallah, Imam Hussein. Imam, can you just, and I'm going to ask those people whose names are not on the chat, this specific chat, that they please write down Imam Hussein's number so that they can send him the contact details, your own contact details, so that Imam can have it. And if there are specific topics or books or articles that Imam feels could benefit us, then you can circulate it to the people on this particular chat. We've created the chat for this group, and we would like everyone who's been participating to submit their numbers. Imam Hussein, can you please give your number slowly?
Yes, it's 0744996822.
Repeat it.
0744996822.
Shukran, Imam Hussein. If there's anyone else who would like to be part of this group, they don't have to necessarily be murids of Sheikh Hazim. If it's people who are really interested in this topic of Tawhid, then please submit the names to Imam Hussein, and we will add them to the chat, and we would like them to participate if they feel there's any potential benefit for them. Inshallah, we're going to ask Imam to make dua. If you've missed anything, then please go to the YouTube channel under Salie Manie, where all the previous sessions have been uploaded. You'll find it useful to just recap and go over certain things. It's a nice, useful tool. I think technology in this instance has been very, very useful for us to use in that way. If there's no other,
But sorry,
yes,
I'm also going to share, I'm also going to share the link for the YouTube channel on the WhatsApp group, so it's easy access for people just to click on there if they want to go to the page. And also, people mustn't forget the Tawhid program at Voice of the Cape tonight between 11 and 12, repeated, inshallah.
inshallah. Shukran very much. All right, tafaddal Imam Hussein with the closing dua.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala asrafil mursaleen. Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Allahumma arhamna, arham walidina, arham awladana, arham aqribaina, warham asdiqaina, warham ikhwanina fillah, washfi mardana, warham mautana, warham ummata Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma aftah lana bil khair, wakhtim lana bil khair, waj'al waqiba umurina bil khair, biyadika al khair wal afiya innaka ala kulli shay'in qadir. وصلى الله تعالى على خير خلق ونور عرش محمد مصطفى صلى الله عليه وسلم وأصحابه أجمعين وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.
Shukran very much, Imam Hussein. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide and protect all of us through these difficult times. Who would have thought, when did the lockdown start? Was it March? March. We now in July, we're almost at the end of July, we're still around. Some people are not with us. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us, our country and this world, so that we all emerge out of this as better and stronger people. And especially for us, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us the ability to get the glimpse of true knowledge of how to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ameen. Ya Rabbal Alameen. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.